Nobody knew where the widow learned to shoot like that. 3 fresh graves stood outside Red Mesa Valley on a gray September morning. The townspeople gathered in silence, staring at the Copper Creek homestead half a mile distant. Smoke still rose from burned wagons scattered across the valley floor like broken toys. Sarah Crane stood alone by her fence line. Her rifle hung loose in one hand. Dried blood stained her sleeves, her collar, the hem of her dress. She didn't seem to notice. Sheriff John Garrett stood beside her, his weathered face pale. "Is it over?" he asked. Sarah's eyes never left the horizon. "It's over." The morning wind carried the smell of gun smoke and death. Behind them, Reverend Hosea Clark led the burial service in a voice that shook. 3 good men going into the ground, 3 families torn apart. The price of standing together when evil comes calling. Thomas Bridger the blacksmith studied the scene with a soldier's eye. Disabled wagons 200 yards out, dead horses at precise intervals, defensive positions that showed tactical genius. He'd fought at Shiloh. He'd seen Union sharpshooters work their deadly art. But this was something else entirely. "Nobody teaches that kind of shooting," he muttered to Ada Murphy, the boarding house owner who'd come to pay her respects. "That's born in blood." Ada's knowing eyes studied the widow. "Maybe she didn't learn it, Thomas. Maybe she just remembered." Young Emma Crane, 16 years old, with her mother's dark hair, stood with her arm around her 10-year-old brother Lucas. Both children watched their mother with faces too old for their years. They'd learned something in the past weeks, something about strength and sacrifice, something about the woman who'd raised them in quiet isolation on this hard-scrabble frontier. The widow turned from the graves. For just a moment her eyes met the Reverend's across the distance. Then she walked back toward her homestead rifle still in hand, leaving the town to bury its dead and wonder. How had a simple widow, a woman who baked pies for church socials and tended her small piece of land, how had she stood against 30 armed men and won? The answer lay 3 weeks back when the first riders came to Copper Creek. But to understand that story, you'd have to understand something about the frontier. Out here, people came to escape. Some ran from poverty, some from the law, some from memories they couldn't bear to carry anymore. Sarah Crane had been running from all 3. Dawn broke gold over the Red Mesa Valley, painting the distant peaks in colors that promised heat before noon. Sarah Crane moved through her morning routine with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd lived alone too long. Check the well, inspect the fence line, count the livestock. Small rituals that kept a homestead alive in country that killed the careless. Her calloused hands moved steadily, but her eyes never stopped moving. Horizon to tree line to canyon rim back to the narrow trail that wound toward town. Always watching, always measuring distance and threat. That's when she saw it. The bent grass near her northern property line. Fresh. The stalks crushed in a pattern she recognized immediately. 3 horses moving slow, deliberate. Not the random track of wild mustangs or wandering cattle. This was surveillance. Sarah knelt beside the tracks, her fingers reading the story written in disturbed earth. The horses had stood here, waited, watching her house while she slept. She straightened slowly, scanning the ridgeline. Nothing moved, but the prickling sensation between her shoulder blades told her the watchers were long gone. They'd seen what they came to see. "Mama," Emma's voice carried from the house. "Breakfast is ready." Sarah turned her face calm and composed. "Coming, sweetheart." She filed the information away, said nothing, and walked back to her family like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The question was how much and how soon. The ride into Red Mesa Valley took an hour on the old mare. Sarah made the trip twice a week, trading eggs and preserved goods for supplies. The town sprawled along a single dusty street, wooden buildings weathered gray by wind and sun. Ada Murphy's boarding house anchored one end of town. The church, small and white-painted, held down the other. Between them clustered the general store, the saloon, the blacksmith's forge, and Sheriff Garrett's office with its faded territorial seal on the door. Sarah tied her mare outside the general store and stepped into the dim interior. The proprietor, a thin man named Wesley Hart, glanced up from his ledger. "Morning, Mrs. Crane. Usual order." "Please." Sarah moved between the shelves, her ears tuned to the low conversation drifting from the saloon next door. The walls were thin, voices carried. Another ranch burned out near Pine Ridge. Same as the Miller place. Electrical problems, they said. Nobody believes that anymore. Sarah's hand stilled on a bag of flour. She listened without seeming to listen, a skill learned long ago in places where the wrong word overheard could mean survival or death. "Heard tell it's organized," someone muttered. "Folks buying up land cheap after the fires, making a killing on it. Sheriff won't do nothing. Can't do nothing. Word is the orders come from higher up, way higher." Sarah paid for her supplies and stepped back into the harsh sunlight. Across the street, Ada Murphy swept the porch of her boarding house with slow, deliberate strokes. The older woman's eyes met Sarah's. A slight nod passed between them. Ada knew something. And Ada, bless her, knew when to speak and when to stay silent. Sarah loaded her supplies and turned the mare toward home. As she rode past the saloon, 3 men stepped out onto the porch. Hard men. Strangers. Their clothes carried trail dust, their gun belts worn low and easy. They watched her pass with eyes that measured and calculated. Sarah kept her gaze forward, her posture relaxed. But her mind catalogued every detail. The leader, tall and scarred with gray, threading his dark hair. The way his hand rested near his pistol, casual but ready. The red insignia stitched onto his vest, a symbol she didn't recognize but filed away for later. She rode on unhurried while her heart beat steady and her mind worked through possibilities. The tracks on her property, the strangers in town, the pattern of burned ranches and forced sales, it all connected threads weaving into a picture she recognized too well. Someone wanted this valley, and they weren't asking permission. That evening Sarah stood on her porch and watched the sun sink toward the western peaks. Emma worked in the small vegetable garden, her movements careful and precise. Lucas chopped kindling with more enthusiasm than skill, his dog Scout sitting alert nearby. This was what she'd built. A quiet life. A safe place for her children to grow up far from the violence that had shaped her. 5 years she'd kept this peace. 5 years since she'd buried Daniel and promised herself never again. No more war, no more blood. Just this small piece of earth and the family she had left. But peace, she'd learned long ago, wasn't something you kept by wanting it. Peace was something you defended. Sarah's eyes traced the northern ridgeline where the watchers had stood. Tomorrow she'd ride that direction, see what else the tracks could tell her. But tonight she'd give her children one more evening of safety, one more night before the storm arrived. "Mama," Lucas called out, "can we have a fire tonight, tell stories?" Sarah smiled, the expression softening her weathered face. "Sure, sweetheart. Gather some good wood." She'd tell them stories tonight. Old tales of heroes and trials, stories her own father had told her and his father before him. Stories about standing your ground when the world tells you to run, stories she hoped they'd never need to live themselves. But hope, like peace, was a fragile thing on the frontier. And Sarah Crane had learned long ago not to trust in fragile things. Emma Crane had her father's eyes, sharp and observant, missing nothing. That's what her mother always said, usually with a mix of pride and sadness that Emma didn't fully understand. Until today. "Take the wagon into town," Sarah had told her that morning. "Pick up the order from Mr. Hart. Take your brother, keep him close." Emma recognized the tone, the same careful calm her mother used when checking the guns or scanning the horizon. Something was wrong. Her mother just wasn't saying what. So Emma went to town with her eyes open and her ears sharp, and she learned things a 16-year-old girl probably shouldn't know. The Red Mesa Saloon sat squat and ugly at the east end of town, its windows grimy with dust. Emma tied the wagon across the street and sent Lucas into the general store with strict instructions to stay put. Then she did something her mother had taught her, whether Sarah knew it or not. She paid attention. The saloon doors hung open to catch the afternoon breeze. Voices drifted out low and serious. Emma positioned herself near the water trough, ostensibly checking the horse's harness close enough to hear. "Brand wants the valley clear by month's end." A gravelly voice, unfamiliar. "That's fast work." Another man, younger sounding. "Even for us. The spring at Copper Creek is the key. Control that, we control the water. Control the water, we control everything." "What about the widow? She ain't selling." A pause. Then the gravelly voice again, colder now. "Then she'll learn what happens to folks who don't cooperate. Same as the others." Emma's hands stilled on the harness strap. Copper Creek. That was their homestead. Her mother's land. Thought the law was staying out of it. The law does what it's told. We got the deputy in our pocket and the sheriff knows better than to stick his neck out. Emma's blood ran cold. She risked a glance through the saloon window. 3 men sat at a corner table. The one doing most of the talking wore a black vest with a red insignia. The same men she'd seen watching their homestead last week when she'd ridden the fence line with her mother. The 4th man at the table made her stomach drop. Deputy Miller. Young, ambitious Deputy Miller, who always smiled at the church socials and helped carry supplies for the widows and elderly. He sat there calm as Sunday morning, counting money while outlaws discussed burning people out of their homes. Emma backed away slowly, her heart hammering. She had to tell her mother. Had to. "You lost, miss?" She spun. One of the men from the table stood in the saloon doorway, his hand resting on his gun belt. Not threatening. Not yet. Just watching her with eyes that had seen too much and cared too little. "No, sir." Emma kept her voice steady, channeling her mother's calm. "Just watering the horse." "That so?" He stepped onto the porch, studying her. "You look familiar. Where you from?" "Copper Creek." The truth came out before she could stop it. "Stupid. Stupid." His eyes sharpened. "The Crane place." "Yes, sir." A slow smile crossed his face, nothing kind in it. "You tell your mama Caleb Stone sends his regards. Tell her Mr. Brand is a reasonable man. He's willing to pay fair price for that land, but his patience won't last forever." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. "Pretty thing like you." Stone continued, his voice soft and dangerous. "Be a shame if something happened. Accidents are common out here, especially for families living alone on isolated homesteads." The threat hung in the air between them, clear as a drawn gun. Emma climbed onto the wagon seat with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. She called for Lucas, kept her movements calm and unhurried, and drove out of town at a steady pace that didn't betray the terror singing through her veins. Only when they'd cleared the last building did she let the mare pick up speed. Lucas chattered about the penny candy Mr. Hart had given him, oblivious to his sister's tension. Emma barely heard him. Her mind raced through what she'd learned. They wanted their land. They'd bought off the law. They were willing to kill for it. And her mother, quiet, gentle Sarah Crane, who baked pies and tended her garden, was standing in the way of men who burned people out of their homes. "Emma," Lucas's voice cut through her thoughts. "What's that?" They'd reached the north edge of their property. Lucas pointed at something on the ground near the old oak tree. Emma pulled the wagon to a stop. Her brother scrambled down and ran to the spot, Scout barking at his heels. "Emma, come look!" She climbed down slowly, dread building in her chest. Lucas stood beside a flat rock half buried in the earth. The stone's surface bore dark stains, old, weathered, but unmistakable to anyone who'd butchered livestock for the table. Blood. A lot of it. More than any animal would leave. "What is it?" Lucas asked, his voice small. Emma knelt beside the stone, her hand hovering over the stains. Something had happened here. Something violent. And her mother. She remembered the way Sarah's face sometimes went distant and hard when she thought no one was looking. The careful way she always positioned herself with her back to walls. The old scars on her hands that Emma had noticed but never asked about. The way her mother could track anything through the roughest country, read weather like a book, and knew exactly how far a rifle could shoot. "Emma," Lucas pressed. "What happened here?" Emma stood, brushing off her skirt. "I don't know, Lucas. But we're going to ask Mama." They climbed back onto the wagon. As Emma turned the mare toward home, she saw her mother standing on the porch watching their approach. Even from this distance, Emma could see the tension in Sarah's stance. Her mother had been waiting, had known somehow that today would be the day things changed. Emma urged the mare faster. She had things to tell, questions to ask, and a terrible suspicion growing in her chest that the quiet widow of Copper Creek wasn't quite what she seemed, that maybe Sarah Crane had secrets, dangerous ones, and maybe, just maybe, those secrets were about to become the only thing standing between Emma's family and the men who wanted them dead. The wagon rattled into the yard. Sarah stepped down from the porch, her eyes moving between her children's faces, reading everything in an instant. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Emma climbed down, her legs unsteady. "Mama, we need to talk. All of us." Lucas ran to Scout, suddenly eager to be anywhere but in this conversation. Sarah's hand touched Emma's shoulder, gentle but grounding. "Inside. Now." As they walked toward the house, Emma glanced back at the northern ridge. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere out there, men with guns and bad intentions were making plans, making threats, promising violence to anyone who stood in their way. But they didn't know what Emma was just beginning to understand. They'd chosen the wrong family to threaten, and the wrong woman to underestimate. The storm was coming to Red Mesa Valley. It had been coming for 5 years, maybe longer. Building in the silence, gathering in the shadows, waiting for the right spark to ignite it. That spark had just arrived. The kitchen table held 3 things: a worn map of Red Mesa Valley, a kerosene lamp burning low, and the truth Sarah Crane had hoped to keep buried. Emma sat across from her mother, hands folded tight, waiting. Lucas had been sent to bed with a story and a promise that everything would be fine. The kind of promise mothers make when they're not entirely sure it's true. Sarah studied her daughter's face in the lamplight. 16 years old and already carrying the weight of adult knowledge. The girl had her father's courage. That would be a blessing or a curse depending on what came next. "Tell me what you heard," Sarah said quietly. Emma repeated the saloon conversation word for word. She had a good memory. Another trait from Daniel. When she finished, Sarah sat silent for a long moment. "The blood-stained rock," Emma added. "Lucas found it near the old oak. That's not from hunting, is it?" "No." "What happened there, Mama?" Sarah's fingers traced the edge of the map. How much truth could a 16-year-old carry? How much should she? "Your father died there," Sarah said finally. 5 years ago this November." Emma's breath caught. "You said he died in town, shot by drifters who robbed the bank." "I lied." The words tasted bitter. The truth was harder to explain, harder to live with. Sarah pulled the lamp closer and pointed to a spot on the map, her property, the northern section, where canyon walls rose steep and narrow. "There's a hidden canyon here, natural formation hard to find unless you know what to look for. The perfect place to move stolen goods without being seen. Your father discovered men using it to run cattle across the territorial line, cattle that didn't belong to them. Rustlers. Worse, organized, connected to powerful people who didn't like witnesses. Daniel was a lawman. He went to make arrests." Sarah's voice stayed level, but her hands betrayed her, gripping the table's edge. "He took 3 deputies with him. Only one came back alive, and he was paid to lie about what happened." Emma's eyes widened. "They ambushed him. 15 men against 4. They didn't stand a chance. The deputy who survived Miller's uncle, he told everyone it was drifters. Random violence. Easier that way. Safer." "But you knew." "I knew." Sarah met her daughter's gaze. "I tracked the men who killed your father, found their camp, learned their names. Could have killed them all if I'd wanted to." The statement hung in the air, casual and terrifying in its certainty. "Why didn't you?" Emma whispered. Sarah gestured toward the bedroom where Lucas slept. "Because of you two. Because your father's last words were protect them, not avenge me. Protect them." She looked away. "So I buried my guns, took this land Daniel had bought for our future, and tried to build something clean, something without blood. But they came back. They never left, just changed names and methods. This Brand fellow, he's the money behind it all. Same operation, bigger now. And I own the one piece of land that makes their whole scheme work." Emma studied the map, her finger tracing the canyon route. She was her father's daughter. She saw the tactical problem immediately. "The spring," she said. "Our property has the only reliable water in the valley. Control that they control, who can farm, who can raise cattle, who can survive. Smart girl. You taught me to read maps, to understand terrain." Emma looked up. "You taught me a lot of things you said were just practical frontier skills, but they weren't, were they? They were survival skills, combat skills." Sarah said nothing. "Who were you, Mama? Before you were just Sarah Crane, the widow?" The question had been coming for 16 years. Sarah had known it would arrive eventually. She'd just hoped for more time. "I was a scout," she said finally. "Army scout during the Apache campaigns. One of the few women they allowed because I could track better than most men and shoot straighter than all of them. That's where I met your father. He was cavalry then before he became a lawman." "Did you kill people?" "Yes." "How many?" "I stopped counting." Sarah's voice went flat, distant. "It was war, Emma. Complicated and ugly and necessary, we told ourselves. I was good at it. Too good. When it ended, I tried to leave that person behind. Emma absorbed this, slowly rearranging her understanding of the quiet woman who'd raised her. You can't leave yourself behind. No, but you can try. Sarah pulled herself back from the memories. Now these men have come to my home, threatened my children, and they don't know what they've stirred up. Question is, what do we do about it? We fight. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Emma leaned forward, fierce and certain. They're going to push. You said so yourself. They'll burn us out or worse if we don't bend, so we don't bend. Fighting means killing. You ready for that? Are you? Sarah studied her daughter's face. Somewhere in the last few years the little girl had become a woman who'd inherited her father's courage and her mother's steel spine. God help them all. Tomorrow, Sarah said, we ride up to that canyon, together. I'll show you what we're dealing with. Then we decide. Why together? Because if something happens to me, you need to know how to read the signs, how to track them, how to survive. Sarah's expression hardened. And because you're right, this is your fight too. I can't protect you by keeping you ignorant anymore. Emma nodded slowly. What about Lucas? He stays with Ada tomorrow. We'll tell him we're checking fence lines. Mama. Emma's voice went soft. That man in town, Caleb Stone, he gave me a message for you. Said to tell you, Mr. Brand is reasonable and willing to pay fair price, but his patience won't last. Sarah's face went very still. Caleb Stone. You know him. I know him. The words came out quiet and deadly. He was there, the day your father died. I saw him right away after. Then tomorrow just became very important. Sarah stood, pulling the map toward her. Get some sleep, Emma. Dawn comes early and we've got a long ride ahead. Emma rose but hesitated at the doorway. Mama, thank you for telling me the truth. You deserved it 5 years ago. I was just too scared to give it to you. Scared of what? Sarah looked at her daughter with eyes that had seen too much. Scared you'd look at me different. Scared you'd see the blood on my hands and stop loving the woman who raised you. Emma crossed back and hugged her mother tight. You're still you, Mama. Just more than I knew. After Emma went to bed, Sarah sat alone with the map and the memories. Caleb Stone. She'd memorized his face that day, along with all the others. Had tracked them for months afterward, learning their patterns, their weaknesses, planning vengeance in exquisite detail. Then Lucas had gotten sick with fever, and Emma had needed her, and the weight of 2 children depending on her had pulled her back from the edge. But she'd never forgotten, never forgiven. And now he'd come back to her land, threatening her children, not even recognizing the widow he'd made. Some debts came due eventually. Sarah had learned that truth in blood and fire long ago. Tomorrow she'd show Emma the canyon, show her the route the rustlers used, show her the exact spot where Daniel had fallen, and then they'd decide together how far they were willing to go to keep the promise Daniel had died trying to fulfill, protect this land, protect this family, and never back down when evil comes calling. Outside, the night wind carried the smell of sage and distant rain. Scout barked once at something in the darkness, then settled. Sarah extinguished the lamp and sat in shadow, her rifle across her knees, keeping watch like she'd done in a dozen different places during a war she'd tried to forget. The past never stayed buried for long. Not in this country. Not when men like Caleb Stone rode the same trails where good men had fallen. Tomorrow she'd face her ghosts. Tonight she'd keep her children safe. That was all that mattered. That, and making sure Caleb Stone understood one simple truth: Sarah Crane was done running, done hiding, done pretending to be someone she wasn't. The quiet widow of Copper Creek was about to remind Red Mesa Valley why some women survived the frontier when stronger men did not. Dawn painted the canyon walls in shades of rust and gold. Sarah and Emma rode in silence, their horses picking careful paths through terrain that grew rougher with each mile. Behind them the homestead dwindled to a speck. Ahead, the mouth of the hidden canyon waited like a wound in the earth. "Stay close," Sarah said. "Watch where I ride. The safe route isn't obvious." Emma followed her mother's track, exactly noting how Sarah avoided certain patches of ground that looked solid but would give way beneath a horse's weight. Another lesson delivered without words. They reached the canyon entrance around mid-morning. Sarah dismounted and ground-tied her mare, gesturing for Emma to do the same. "From here we walk. Horses would echo. We want to see without being seen." The canyon walls rose steep on either side, cutting the sky to a narrow ribbon of blue overhead. Old water damage had carved the stone into strange shapes that cast stranger shadows. The perfect place for secrets. Sarah moved like a ghost through the terrain, her steps silent despite the loose gravel. Emma tried to match her, feeling clumsy and loud, but her mother never complained or looked back, just kept moving deeper into the canyon's throat. After 20 minutes of careful progress, Sarah held up a hand. "Stop!" She pointed ahead. Emma crept forward and looked. The canyon opened into a wider space, almost circular, where spring runoff had created a natural corral of sorts. Fresh wagon tracks scarred the ground. Empty grain sacks lay scattered. The burned remnants of a campfire smoldered near the center, and there, painted onto the canyon wall in fading whitewash, a red insignia. The same symbol Emma had seen on Caleb Stone's vest. Sarah knelt beside the wagon tracks, her fingers reading the story written in pressed earth. 3 wagons, heavy loaded, passed through no more than 2 days ago. Cattle. Maybe. Or something else they don't want seen. Sarah stood scanning the canyon walls. This is a staging point. They move goods through here at night, rest the animals during day, then continue north before dawn. Emma studied the setup with growing understanding. "Our land is right above this canyon. If we patrol our fence line, we'd hear wagons moving through. Which is why they want us gone. We're the only ones close enough to notice." "What did Papa find when he came here?" Sarah walked to the far end of the clearing. A dark stain marked the rocks there, old blood weathered by years of rain and sun, but still visible if you knew what to look for. "This is where they killed him," Sarah said quietly. "He'd brought 3 deputies to make arrests. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Daniel tried to surrender, offered to leave if they'd just ride on. They shot him anyway." Emma touched the stained rock with trembling fingers. All her life she'd wondered about her father, tried to remember his face. Now she stood where he'd died, and the grief felt fresh and sharp despite the years. "I'm sorry you had to see this," Sarah said. "No," Emma's voice steadied. "I needed to. I needed to understand what we're up against." A sound froze them both. Hoofbeats, multiple riders approaching fast from the canyon's far end. Sarah grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her into a narrow cleft between boulders. They pressed themselves into shadow, barely breathing. 4 riders emerged into the clearing. Emma recognized Caleb Stone immediately. Tall, scarred, riding a gray gelding with the confidence of a man who owned whatever ground he stood on. The 3 men with him carried rifles across their saddles. "Check for tracks," Stone ordered. "Someone's been nosing around." One of the men dismounted and studied the ground. "Horse prints. 2 riders. Fresh this morning." "Damn it." Stone scanned the canyon walls, his eyes passing within feet of their hiding spot. "Find them." Sarah's hand moved to the knife at her belt. Emma saw the calculation in her mother's eyes, 4 armed men against 2 unarmed women in a kill box. The odds weren't good. But then Stone checked his pocket watch and swore. "No time. We're late for the meeting with Brand. Let's move." "What about the tracks?" "Could be anyone. Hunters, drifters." But Stone didn't sound convinced. He took one last look around the canyon before wheeling his horse. "Post guards tonight. I want to know who's showing interest in our operation." The riders departed as quickly as they'd come, the sound of hoofbeats fading into distance. Sarah and Emma stayed hidden for another 10 minutes, making sure the men were truly gone before emerging from cover. "We need to leave," Sarah said. "Now." They retraced their path quickly, no longer worried about stealth, just distance. Only when they'd cleared the canyon mouth and remounted did Emma speak. "They're going to catch us eventually. Set guards like Stone said." "I know. So what do we do?" Sarah looked at her daughter with something like pride mixed with sorrow. "We do what your father should have done. We don't come alone, and we don't come to make arrests. We come to end this." They rode hard for home, pushing the horses faster than was wise on rough terrain. Sarah kept checking their back trail, watching for pursuit that didn't come. But something else was waiting when they crested the rise above their homestead. Smoke. Not from their chimney. From the yard. Sarah kicked her mare into a full gallop, Emma right behind her. They thundered down the slope and into the yard to find Lucas sitting on the porch steps, his face streaked with tears, Scout barking frantically beside him. The chicken coop was burning. Someone had doused it with kerosene and set it ablaze, all their laying hens dead or scattered. Sarah dismounted in a rush and pulled Lucas into her arms. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "No, Mama." Lucas clung to her. "But they said next time they'd burn the house with us inside." Emma ran for the well, hauling water to douse the flames before they spread. Sarah held her son and stared at the destruction with eyes gone flat and cold. "How many men?" "3. I was playing with Scout when they rode up. They didn't even look at me, Mama. Just poured the kerosene and lit it and rode away laughing." Sarah set Lucas down gently. "Go inside. Pack a bag. You're going to stay with Mrs. Murphy in town for a while." "I don't want to leave you." "I know, sweetheart. But I need you safe. Can you be brave for me?" Lucas nodded, wiping his eyes. He ran inside, Scout at his heels. Emma finished dousing the coop and walked back to her mother. "They're escalating." "Yes." "What's next? The house, the barn?" "Probably." Sarah's jaw set hard. "Unless we stop them first." "How?" Sarah looked at her daughter, really looked at her and saw a woman grown, a woman who deserved the truth and the choice that came with it. "Tonight we ride to town," Sarah said. "We talk to people we can trust. Sheriff Garrett, Thomas Bridger, Ada Murphy. We tell them what's happening and give them a choice: stand with us or get out of the way. And if they won't stand, then we stand alone." Sarah's voice carried the weight of old promises and older debts. "I've stood alone before. I know how it's done." Emma touched her mother's arm. "Not alone, Mama. Never alone again." The two women stood in the smoke-stained yard, the burned coop smoldering behind them, and made a silent pact that needed no words. The men who'd killed Daniel Crane had made one mistake 5 years ago. They'd left his wife alive. Now they'd made a second mistake. They'd threatened her children. Some mistakes you only get to make once. The Red Mesa Valley Church filled slowly that Sunday morning. It always filled slowly. Frontier folk took their time about everything, including worship. But today the congregation arrived with unusual urgency, drawn by whispered rumors and growing fear. Sarah sat in her customary back pew with Emma and Lucas on either side. They'd survived the week since the chicken coop burning, but only because Sarah had kept watch every night, rifle across her knees while her children slept. Thomas Bridger caught her eye from across the aisle and nodded slightly. The message was clear: stay after service. We need to talk. Reverend Hosea Clark mounted the pulpit, his weathered face grave. He was a man who'd seen violence before, had been a chaplain during the war between the states, and he recognized the signs of violence coming again. "Brothers and sisters," he began, "we gather in troubled times. Some among us have faced threats. Others have lost property to mysterious fires. All of us feel the shadow falling across our valley." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the congregation. "I've been asked to make an announcement," Clark continued. "There will be a community meeting this afternoon, 2 o'clock in this very building. All are welcome. All are encouraged to attend. Decisions must be made about our collective future." Sarah felt Emma shift beside her. They both knew what this meeting would be about. The question was whether the town would choose courage or convenience. After the service, people lingered in small groups, talking in low voices. Sarah collected her children and started toward the wagon, but Ada Murphy intercepted them. "Lucas, dear," Ada said with grandmotherly warmth, "I baked cookies this morning. Far too many for just me. Would you like to help me eat them?" Lucas looked at his mother. Sarah nodded. "Emma, too," Ada added. "I need help carrying them from my kitchen." When the children were out of earshot, Ada's expression hardened. "That meeting this afternoon, it's not what you think. Brand's sending his lawyer. He's going to make an offer to buy out the whole valley claim. It's for everyone's good." "How do you know?" "Because Wesley Hart's wife told me. Wesley got a visit yesterday. They offered him a generous price for his store, said he'd be smart to take it before things get unpleasant." Sarah's hands tightened on her shawl. "They're trying to make it look legitimate. Buy out enough people claim the holdouts are being unreasonable." "Exactly." Ada glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. "Sarah, people are scared. 3 ranches burned in as many months. The Millers lost everything. The Johnsons sold for a pittance and moved to California. Folks see the pattern. So they'll sell, save themselves, and let Brand have what he wants. Some will, but not all. Ada's eyes blazed with stubborn fire. Thomas Bridger won't. Neither will I. There are others, good people who understand what's at stake. Which is freedom, independence, the right to live on land we worked for without some robber baron dictating terms. Ada's voice dropped. I know what you are, Sarah, or what you were. Thomas knows too. We've seen the signs, the way you move, the way you watch. You're not just a widow trying to survive. Sarah said nothing. We need you, Ada continued. Not to fight God, willing it won't come to that, but to stand firm. Show these bastards that Red Mesa Valley won't be bullied or bought. And if they push anyway, then we push back. Ada's grandmother facade cracked completely. My husband died at Gettysburg. I didn't come west to surrender to another kind of tyrant. I'll stand, Sarah. Question is, will you? Sarah thought of Lucas's tear-streaked face, the burned coop, the blood stain in the canyon where Daniel fell, 5 years of hiding who she was, what she could do. I'll stand, she said quietly. But Ada, you need to understand, if this goes bad, people will die. Maybe people we care about. I know. Ada's voice stayed steady. But living on your knees isn't living at all. My husband taught me that. They parted with nothing more said. Sarah collected her children and drove them home, her mind already working through tactical problems and moral calculations. That afternoon she returned to town alone. The church was packed. Every pew filled, people standing along the walls. The whole valley had turned out, drawn by fear and hope in equal measure. Sheriff John Garrett stood at the front, looking uncomfortable in his formal vest. Beside him sat a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, Brand's lawyer, no doubt. Sarah took a position against the back wall where she could see the whole room. Thomas Bridger stood nearby, solid and dependable as always. Ada sat in the front pew with the other town elders. Sheriff Garrett called for order. Folks, we're here to discuss the future of Red Mesa Valley. Mr. Silas Reed represents certain business interests that have made a generous offer. I'll let him explain. Reed stood all false warmth and practiced charm. Good people of Red Mesa Valley, I come bearing opportunity. My client, Colonel Marcus Brand, wishes to consolidate land holdings in this region for the purpose of establishing modern agricultural operations that will benefit everyone. Benefit him, you mean? Someone muttered. Reed ignored the interruption. Colonel Brand is prepared to offer premium prices for all properties, fair market value plus 20%. He'll even cover relocation costs for those wishing to move elsewhere. All he asks is that decisions be made quickly, within the month. And if we don't sell, Thomas Bridger's voice carried across the room. Then you miss an extraordinary opportunity, Reed replied smoothly. The colonel is prepared to move forward with or without unanimous cooperation, but surely you see the wisdom in accepting such generous terms. We see the wisdom of men who threaten widows and burn chicken coops, Ada Murphy said coldly. Reed's smile never wavered. I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to, madam. The colonel conducts his business with complete propriety. Propriety like the fires at the Miller Ranch, someone shouted. The Johnson place. Tragic accidents, Reed said. Sadly common in frontier life. All the more reason to accept the colonel's protection and partnership. Sarah listened to the room divide. Some folks nodded along with Reed's words, seduced by the promise of easy money and safety. Others saw the threat beneath the silk gloves. Sheriff Garrett held up his hands for quiet. Let's put it to a vote. Those in favor of accepting Colonel Brand's offer. Wait. Sarah's voice cut through the chatter. Every head turned. She stepped forward, moving through the crowd with deliberate calm. Before we vote, I have a question for Mr. Reed. Of course, Mrs. Crane, Sarah Crane. My property includes the spring at Copper Creek. I notice you haven't mentioned water rights. Reed's smile tightened microscopically. Water rights would transfer with the land naturally. Naturally. And what happens to the families downstream who depend on that spring for irrigation? Arrangements would be made. What kind of arrangements? Free access, paid access? Sarah kept her voice reasonable, but the room had gone very quiet. See, Mr. Reed, that spring feeds the whole valley. Control it, you control who can farm, who can raise livestock, who can survive. I assure you, Mrs. Crane, the Colonel has everyone's best interests at heart. I'm sure he does. Sarah's tone made it clear she believed no such thing. I have another question. Where is Colonel Brand right now? Reed blinked. I'm afraid I don't, because if he's such a generous man with everyone's best interests at heart, seems like he'd come make these offers himself instead of sending a lawyer. Sarah looked around the room. Makes me wonder what kind of man hides behind lawyers and threatens families instead of facing people direct. How dare you? I dare because this is my land, my home, my children's future. Sarah's voice hardened. And I'm not selling. Not for 20% premium, not for double. My husband died protecting this valley from men like your Colonel Brand. I'll be damned if I surrender what he died for just because some robber baron makes pretty promises. The room erupted. Some people applauded, others shouted objections. Reed tried to regain control but lost it completely when Thomas Bridger stood. I stand with the widow, Thomas declared. My forge isn't for sale. Ada Murphy rose. Neither is my boarding house. One by one others stood. Not everyone, maybe not even half, but enough to show that Red Mesa Valley wouldn't roll over without a fight. Reed's mask of charm finally cracked. You're making a mistake. The Colonel is offering you partnership. Refuse and you'll face what? Sarah took a step closer. Accidents fires the same fate as the Millers and Johnsons. I'm simply saying that the frontier is dangerous. Protection is valuable. Protection from what exactly? Sarah's eyes locked on his. From the men your Colonel employs, the ones burning coops and threatening children. Reed gathered his papers with shaking hands. This meeting is over. You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, the Colonel's patience will be exhausted. He stormed out, leaving the room in chaos. Sheriff Garrett tried to restore order, but Sarah was already heading for the door. She'd said what needed saying. The rest was up to the town. Outside, Thomas caught up with her. That was dangerous. You've painted a target on yourself. The target was already there. I just made it official. What happens now? Sarah looked toward the distant peaks, calculating distances and timelines. Now they stop pretending to be reasonable. Now they come with force. And we need to be ready. I've got 5 men who'll stand, maybe more if I push. Don't push anyone who's not willing. This won't be easy and it won't be clean. Thomas studied her with knowing eyes. You've done this before. Stood against worse odds. Different war. Same stakes. Will we win? Sarah thought of Daniel bleeding out in the canyon, of Lucas crying over a burned chicken coop, of Emma learning to read maps and track men through rough country. We'll win, she said quietly, or we'll die trying, but either way we'll stand. She climbed onto her wagon and drove home through the gathering dusk. Behind her, Red Mesa Valley divided into camps, those who'd sell and those who'd stand. The vote had been taken, not with raised hands but with hearts and spines. Sarah Crane had just declared war on Colonel Marcus Brand, and somewhere in the shadows Caleb Stone was already making plans to end the widow who refused to know her place. The storm was coming, 3 weeks until it broke in blood and fire. But tonight Sarah would sit with her children and tell them stories of courage and consequence. Tomorrow she'd teach Emma to shoot. 3 nights Sarah kept vigil, and 3 nights nothing came. That was almost worse than an attack. The waiting, the watching, the knowledge that Caleb Stone's men were out there somewhere planning their next move, while she sat in darkness with a rifle across her knees and her children sleeping behind thin walls. Emma had taken to sleeping in her day-clothes boots within arm's reach. Lucas pretended to be brave during daylight, but cried in his sleep. Scout paced the perimeter of the house, hackles raised at shadows only he could see. On the 4th night, Sarah sent Emma to town. I need you to do something for me, she'd said that morning, keeping her voice low so Lucas wouldn't hear. Something dangerous. Emma had straightened her shoulders. Tell me. Deputy Miller is dirty. We know that. But I need to know how dirty. Who else is on Brand's payroll when they're planning to move? How many men they can bring? Sarah had gripped her daughter's arm. Can you follow him? Watch where he goes, who he meets with without being seen? You taught me to track deer through thick timber. A man in town will be easier. Men are never easier, Emma. They carry guns and bad intentions. Deer just run. But Emma had gone anyway because she was her father's daughter and her mother's student, and she understood that information was as valuable as ammunition in the fight ahead. Now Sarah sat alone on the porch watching the moon rise over the canyon rim. Thomas Bridger had ridden out earlier with news from town. 7 families had sold to Brand in the past 3 days. The valley was fracturing fear, winning over fury. "Can't blame them," Thomas had said. His blacksmith's hands clenched tight. Most of these folks came west to escape trouble, not find more of it. They see what happened to the Millers and Johnsons. Figure it's better to take the money and leave with their lives. How many standing firm? 6 families counting yours. Ada Murphy's boarding house, my forge, the Hendersons' cattle operation, the widow Chen's general store. Young couple named Wright just bought the old Peterson place, too new to know better probably, but they've got spine. And old Jacob Swift. Sarah's head had snapped up at the last name. Jacob Swift is still alive. Lives like a hermit up in the hills. Hasn't come to town in 3 years. But he sent word anyone tries to run him off his claim they better bring a coffin. For themselves. Sarah had smiled at that, the first real smile in days. Jacob Swift. She'd thought the old cavalry scout was long dead. If Jacob was standing, they had a chance. The man had forgotten more about frontier warfare than most soldiers ever learned. Now, alone in the darkness, Sarah let herself remember those days. The Apache campaigns. The long rides through hostile territory. The cold camps and careful silences. Jacob had been her teacher then, the grizzled scout who'd seen something in the young woman trailing the cavalry column and decided she was worth training. "You've got the patience for it," he'd told her once. "Most folks see tracking as rushing after signs, but real tracking, that's about understanding. Reading the story in bent grass and broken twigs, knowing your enemy better than they know themselves." She'd learned from Jacob, learned well enough that when the war ended and she'd met Daniel Crane, she'd been able to ride beside him as an equal, well enough that she'd survived when others hadn't, well enough that she'd killed when necessary and carried the weight of it ever since. Scout's low growl pulled her from the memories. Sarah's hand moved to her rifle eyes, scanning the darkness. There. Movement on the northern ridge. Just a shadow against stars, but wrong somehow. Too deliberate, too purposeful. She counted. 1 rider, 2, 3. Circling her property in the moonlight, not even trying to hide. A message. "We know you're watching, we're watching too." Sarah didn't move, didn't give them the satisfaction of a response, just sat and observed, memorizing the pattern of their circuit, the intervals between passes, the way they stayed just out of rifle range. Professional. Careful. These weren't drunk ranch hands looking for trouble. These were Stone's men, and they knew exactly what they were doing. After an hour, they disappeared back into the darkness. Sarah stayed on the porch until dawn painted the eastern sky, then finally allowed herself to stand and stretch muscles gone stiff from the long watch. Lucas emerged, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Did they come, Mama?" "They came to watch. Nothing more." "When will they do more?" "Soon." No point lying to him. Lucas was 10 years old, but growing up fast the way frontier children did when circumstances demanded it. "But we'll be ready." She sent him to tend the animals and went inside to make breakfast. Her hands shook slightly as she worked the coffee grinder. Lack of sleep, she told herself, just fatigue, but she knew better. The shaking had started 3 nights ago after she'd handled the rifle for the first time in 5 years. The tremor in her fingers when she loaded ammunition, the way her breath caught when she sighted down the barrel at imagined targets. War trauma. The doctor at the fort had called it soldier's heart back during the campaigns, said it was common in men who'd seen too much combat. He'd been surprised to find it in a woman, but not surprised it existed. The mind remembers what the body tries to forget, he'd explained. Every time you pick up that weapon, every time you prepare to take a life, your body relives every previous time you've done it. Sarah had learned to manage it, breathe through it, function despite it. But she'd also learned that it never truly went away. You just got better at hiding it from others, and sometimes from yourself. The coffee was almost ready when Emma slipped in through the back door, quiet as a ghost. Her clothes were dusty, her face flushed with exertion and excitement. "Mama," she whispered urgently, "I followed Deputy Miller. You need to hear this." Sarah poured 2 cups of coffee and sat her daughter down at the table. "Start from the beginning." Emma had positioned herself near the sheriff's office around sundown, watching from the alley behind Ada Murphy's boarding house. Deputy Miller had emerged just after dark, checking the street before heading toward the saloon. But he hadn't gone inside. Instead, he'd continued past, taking the back trail toward the old mining camp 2 miles north of town. Emma had followed on foot, using the skills her mother had taught her, moving in shadow, staying downwind, keeping to cover. At the abandoned mine, Miller had met with 5 men. Emma had crept close enough to hear their conversation hidden behind a collapsed ore cart. "Brand's tired of waiting," one man had said. The voice belonged to Caleb Stone, though Emma couldn't see his face in the darkness. "Time to apply real pressure." "What do you want me to do?" Miller had asked. "Your job. Stay out of our way. When we move on the Crane place, make sure Sheriff Garrett is occupied elsewhere." "When?" 2 nights from now. New moon. We'll hit the homestead after midnight, burn them out while they sleep. If the widow survives, she'll get the message. If she doesn't—" Stone had shrugged. "Problem solved either way." "What about the others who won't sell Bridger Murphy the rest?" "Once Crane falls, they'll fold. She's the stubborn one, the symbol of resistance. Break her, we break the valley's spine." Miller had hesitated. "Stone, there's women and children in that house." "Should have thought of that before they chose to stand against the colonel. This is business. Sometimes business gets messy." Emma had heard enough. She'd slipped away as quietly as she'd come and run back to town, then borrowed a horse from Ada's stable and ridden hard for home. Sarah sat very still as Emma finished. 2 nights, less than 48 hours to prepare for an attack by armed men who'd come to burn her house and kill her children. "How many men?" she asked, her voice steady despite the ice in her veins. "I couldn't see in the dark, but I heard at least 5 different voices, plus Miller makes 6. Stone said we'll hit the homestead. That means he'll be there personally." Sarah's mind raced through calculations. 6 men, maybe more. Professional. Ruthless. Coming in darkness to murder a woman and 2 children in their beds. "Mama, we should run. Take Lucas and go. They can have the damn land." "Language," Sarah said automatically, then shook her head. "We can't run, Emma. They'll just find us somewhere else. Men like Brand don't leave loose ends." "Then what do we do?" Sarah looked at her daughter, really looked at her. 16 years old, brave and smart and capable, but still a child, still innocent of the things Sarah had done, the darkness she'd carried. "I'm going to do what I should have done 5 years ago," Sarah said quietly. "I'm going to end this. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If things go wrong, you take Lucas and ride to Jacob Swift's place. You tell him Sarah Crane sent you. He'll keep you safe until this is over. I'm not leaving you to face them alone." "Emma." "No." Emma's jaw set with familiar stubbornness. "You said we stand together. You said I deserve to know the truth, to make my own choices. Well, I'm choosing to stand. With you. Whatever comes." Sarah felt something crack in her chest. Pride and fear and love all tangled together. This was what Daniel had wanted: strong children who could survive anything. But God, the price of that strength. "All right," she said finally. "Then we prepare. Together. I'll teach you what you need to know." They spent the day transforming the homestead into a fortress. Sarah showed Emma how to create firing positions with overlapping fields of view, how to stack materials for bullet stops without making them obvious, how to prepare escape routes and rally points if they had to abandon the house. Lucas helped without understanding the full scope of what was coming. He thought they were playing a game, making the house safer from bad men. Sarah let him think that. Time enough for harsh truths, when harsh truths became necessary. As the sun set, Thomas Bridger arrived with reinforcements, 2 ranch hands he trusted, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. "Jacob sent word," Thomas reported. "He's coming down from the hills. Should be here by tomorrow night." "Good." Sarah felt a weight lift slightly. Jacob Swift changed the equation. With his experience, they might actually survive this. "There's something else," Thomas added. "Sheriff Garrett stopped by the forge this afternoon. Said he couldn't officially help, but—" He pulled a deputy's badge from his pocket. "He said if I happened to form a posse to investigate suspicious activity, that would be within my rights as a concerned citizen. And if that posse included folks with military experience, well, that would just be prudent." Sarah took the badge, feeling its weight. Legal authority. It mattered even out here, especially out here. Thank you, Thomas. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive what's coming. That night, Sarah kept watch again. But this time Emma sat beside her, cradling a rifle she'd spent the afternoon learning to load and aim. Not to shoot, Sarah had been clear about that. Emma was backup. Last resort. The trigger was Sarah's to pull. The night stayed quiet. No riders on the ridgeline. No shadows circling the property. Just the vast silence of the frontier and two women waiting for violence to arrive. "Mama," Emma whispered around midnight. "Are you scared?" Sarah considered lying, decided her daughter deserved better. "Terrified," she admitted. "Every single time. But you still fight. Because the alternative is worse. Because your father taught me that some things are worth being scared for." Sarah looked at her daughter in the moonlight. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Emma. It's doing what needs doing despite the fear." "Did you learn that from Papa? From everyone who died so I could live? From every battle I survived when I shouldn't have? From every time I had to choose between safety and what was right?" Sarah's voice went soft. "And from you and Lucas, knowing you're depending on me. That's stronger than any fear." They sat in comfortable silence watching stars wheel overhead. Somewhere out there, Caleb Stone's men were preparing to kill them. But here in this moment, there was just a mother and daughter keeping watch together. Tomorrow, Sarah would reach out to the allies who'd stood firm. Tomorrow, she'd put the final pieces in place for what was coming, but tonight, she savored this quiet moment with her child, stored it away as a memory to carry through whatever darkness lay ahead, because in 2 nights the storm would break. And Sarah Crane would remind Red Mesa Valley why some women survived the frontier when stronger men didn't. Not through luck, not through mercy, through skill and will and the absolute refusal to let evil win without a fight. Dawn came cold and gray. Sarah woke Emma and gave her new instructions. "I need you to ride to Jacob Swift's place today. Tell him everything. Bring him back here by tonight if he'll come." "What are you going to do?" "Reconnaissance. Thomas and I are going back to the canyon. If Stone's planning an attack tomorrow night, they might be staging supplies there today. I need to know what we're facing." Emma didn't argue. She saddled her horse and rode north toward the hills while Sarah and Thomas prepared for their own journey. They reached the canyon entrance by mid-morning. The same careful approach as before, horses left ground-tied final distance covered on foot. But this time Sarah carried her rifle and Thomas had his cavalry carbine across his back. The canyon clearing showed fresh activity. 2 wagons sat parked near the far wall loaded with barrels and crates. 4 men worked around them, unloading supplies with professional efficiency. Sarah and Thomas watched from cover, counting men and weapons, noting positions and patterns. Standard guard rotation, 2 men on watch, 2 working. They'd cycle every hour or so. 6 barrels of kerosene, Thomas whispered. "That's not for lamps." "No," Sarah's jaw tightened. "That's for burning us out. Multiple fires to overwhelm any defense. We could take them now. 4 men, 2 of us. Element of surprise. And alert Stone that we know his plan. No. We watch, we learn, we leave." They were about to retreat when horses approached from the canyon's far entrance. Sarah's hand moved to her rifle as 5 riders emerged into the clearing. Caleb Stone sat tall in the saddle, his scarred face expressionless. The 4 men with him carried themselves like professionals, ex-cavalry maybe, or regulars who'd gone bad after the war. Stone dismounted and inspected the wagons. "This everything?" "All set, boss." One of the workers gestured at the barrels. "Enough to torch every building on the Crane property 3 times over." "Good. We hit them tomorrow night like planned. I want—" He stopped mid-sentence, turned slowly scanning the canyon walls. Sarah froze. She hadn't made a sound. Hadn't moved, but Stone's instincts had picked up some wrongness in the environment. "Someone's here," he said quietly. "Spread out. Search pattern." The men moved with military precision rifles ready. Sarah and Thomas had seconds before they'd be discovered. Sarah made a decision. She stood, rifle aimed at Stone's chest, stepping out of cover with Thomas beside her. "That's far enough," she called out. The clearing erupted in shouted warnings and cocking guns, but Stone held up a hand stopping his men from shooting. "Well now," he said, studying her with professional interest. "The widow herself. That took guts coming here." "Or stupidity," one of his men muttered. "No, not stupidity." Stone's eyes never left Sarah. "You're tracking us, learning our patterns. Smart, military smart." His head tilted slightly. "What did you do before you were a widow, Mrs. Crane?" "Survived. Same as I plan to do now." "You've got one rifle and an old man against 6 guns. Your survival instinct must be lacking." "7 guns," Thomas corrected. "And I fought at Shiloh. How about you?" Stone smiled, no warmth in it. "Chancellorsville, Antietam, all the bloody ones." His attention shifted back to Sarah. "But this isn't war, Mrs. Crane. This is business. Colonel Brand wants your land. You've made your position clear. Tomorrow night we'll make ours clear. I suggest you reconsider. So you can burn my children in their beds. That's how the great Colonel Brand conducts business." "Colonel Brand conducts business however necessary, same as we all did during the war." Stone's voice went flat. "You want to make this personal, widow, fine. Your husband made it personal 5 years ago when he tried to arrest men who were just doing a job. He could have walked away, could have looked the other way. Instead, he made a choice." Sarah's rifle steadied on him. "You killed him." "I followed orders, same as you probably did in whatever war you fought." Stone took a step closer. "Don't pretend you're better than me. Don't pretend you haven't killed men for reasons just as hollow as money. We're soldiers, widow. We do what we're told." "I stopped being a soldier when the war ended." "Did you?" Stone's voice carried something like curiosity. "Then who are you now? Just a woman with a rifle she doesn't want to use, or something else?" Sarah's finger rested on the trigger. One shot. She could end Caleb Stone right here, eliminate the leader and maybe scatter his men. But then what Brand would send more, meaner, and she'd have thrown away any moral high ground. "Walk away," she said instead. "All of you. Tell Brand the widow says no. Tell him if he wants this land he can come himself instead of hiding behind hired guns." Stone laughed, genuinely amused. "That's it. That's your threat. You'll shoot us all. You haven't fired a single round, widow. You're hesitating. That's how I know you're not ready for this fight." He was right, and they both knew it. Sarah could feel Thomas tense beside her, sense his confusion. They had the drop on Stone's men, should use it. But the shaking in Sarah's hands had started, the same tremor that came every time she aimed at a human target, the weight of past kills pressing down. Stone saw it, his eyes sharpened with understanding. "War broke you," he said softly. "Didn't it? You can shoot targets and deer all day, but put a person in your sights and you freeze. I've seen it before. Good soldiers who couldn't come back from what they'd done." He started walking toward her, slow and deliberate. "You're not a threat, widow. You're just a scared woman playing at being dangerous." "Stop," Sarah's voice shook. "Don't come closer. Or what, you'll shoot me. We both know you won't." Stone was within 10 feet now. "Tomorrow night we're coming. And you'll do what you should have done today, nothing." His hand moved toward his pistol. Sarah shot him. The rifle crack echoed off canyon walls. Stone stumbled back, clutching his shoulder where blood bloomed across his shirt. Not a kill shot. Deliberate placement. His men raised their weapons, but Stone held up his good hand. "Hold." He stared at Sarah with new understanding. "You aimed for the shoulder. Could have killed me. Chose not to. Next time I won't be so generous." Stone pressed his hand against the wound, his scarred face pale but focused. "You know what I believe, you widow. Because that shot—" He shook his head. 300 yards, moving target, shoulder placement. That's not luck. That's training." Then his eyes widened slightly, recognition dawning. "I know that shooting pattern," he said slowly. "Saw it once before, 5 years ago. The day we—" He stopped, stared. Daniel Crane's wife wasn't just his wife. She was the scout, the tracker, the one we could never catch. Sarah said nothing. Sweet Jesus. Stone actually laughed, blood seeping between his fingers. "You were there that day. Weren't you tracking us, following our trail? You could have killed us all then. Why didn't you? I had children to raise. And now—" Sarah's rifle never wavered. "Now those children are threatened. Changes things. Stone studied her with something approaching respect. Tomorrow night just got a lot more interesting. Tell you what, Widow, we'll come at you fair. No burning while you sleep. Straight fight. You and yours against me and mine. Why? Professional courtesy. Soldier to soldier. He mounted his horse one-handed. But make no mistake, I'm still coming, and I'm still going to win, because I've got more men and fewer scruples. He wheeled his horse and left his men covering his retreat. In seconds, the canyon was empty except for Sarah and Thomas. Thomas lowered his carbine, staring at Sarah. What in God's name just happened? Sarah's hands were shaking violently now, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. She sat down heavily on a nearby rock. He was there, she whispered, the day Daniel died. Stone was one of them. You recognized his voice. Just now, when he was talking. The cadence, the tone. Sarah's breath came in short gasps. I've been hunting that voice in my nightmares for 5 years, and I just let him ride away. You shot him. Proved you could do it. Shot his shoulder. Could have killed him. Should have killed him. Sarah looked at her shaking hands. This is why I stopped. Why I tried to leave it behind. Because killing people, even people who deserve it, it breaks something inside you. Thomas sat beside her, solid and steady. But you did it anyway. When you had to. For my children. Only for them. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. We should go, Thomas finally said. Tell the others. Get ready for tomorrow night. Sarah nodded, forcing herself to stand. They made their way back to the horses, neither speaking. But as they rode toward home, Sarah's mind worked through what Stone had said. A fair fight, straight on, no burning while they slept. She didn't trust him, didn't trust any of it. But she believed he recognized her now, recognized what she'd been, what she might still be if pushed hard enough. Tomorrow night, Caleb Stone would learn the full answer to that question, and so would Sarah herself. Emma returned at sunset with Jacob Swift riding beside her. The old scout was exactly as Sarah remembered, weathered as canyon rock, sharp-eyed as a hawk, carrying his years like a weapon rather than a burden. He dismounted stiffly and studied the homestead with professional assessment. Sarah Crane, his voice was gravel and smoke. Heard you'd gone soft, raising chickens and baking pies. I tried Jacob, didn't take. Never does, not with our kind. He spat tobacco juice and grinned. Heard you shot Caleb Stone today. Shoulder placement at 300 yards. Still got it, girl. Word travels fast. I've got ears in every saloon between here and the territorial line. Stone rode into town an hour ago, arm in a sling, cussing about widow women with sniper rifles. Jacob's grin widened. Town's buzzing. Some folks are scared, others are laughing. Ada Murphy sent a bottle of whiskey to the saloon with instructions to toast the widow who put a bullet in Brand's top gun. Despite everything, Sarah smiled. How's the shoulder? He'll live. Though he's telling everyone you could have killed him and chose mercy. Says it makes you more dangerous, not less. He's not wrong. Thomas emerged from the house. Jacob? Been a long time. Tom Bridger. Still swinging that hammer? Every day. You still tracking ghosts in the high country? Ghosts and worse. Jacob turned serious. Sarah, we need to talk. Private. They walked to the barn while Thomas kept watch. Inside, away from curious ears, Jacob pulled a flask from his coat and took a long swallow. I've been watching Brand's operation for months, he said. Staying out of it because I'm old and tired and I've fought enough wars. But when I heard he'd come after you, he shook his head. Some fights you can't ignore. What do you know about him, about Brand? Colonel Marcus Brand. Former Union cavalry, decorated at Gettysburg. Went into business after the war, made a fortune in railroad contracts and land speculation. He's legitimate on paper. Underneath, Jacob's eyes went cold. He's as corrupt as they come. Uses legal means when he can, violence when he can't. And he always wins because he's got connections that reach all the way to the territorial governor. So even if we survive tomorrow night, he'll just send more men, meaner men, or he'll use the law against you, manufacture charges, have you arrested, take your kids into protective custody. Jacob leaned against the barn wall. You can't win this straight up, Sarah, not unless you remove Brand himself. You're saying I should kill him. I'm saying you need to think beyond tomorrow night. Stone's a symptom, Brand's the disease. Sarah felt the weight of it pressing down. Where is Brand now? Town. Arrived this afternoon with an entourage, staying at Ada's boarding house, which must be sticking in his craw since Ada made clear what she thinks of him. Jacob pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. Ada sent this. Thought you should know. Sarah unfolded the note. Ada's precise handwriting detailed Brand's movements, the men with him, his schedule for the next 2 days, including the fact that Brand would be riding out to inspect his new properties tomorrow morning, alone, except for 2 bodyguards. She's giving you an opportunity, Jacob said quietly. Take out Brand before Stone's men attack. Cut the head off the snake. That's murder. That's war. Sarah crumpled the note. I've killed men in battle, Jacob. I've never assassinated anyone in cold blood. Then don't. Let Brand win. Watch him take your land, scatter your neighbors, turn this whole valley into his personal empire. Jacob's voice went hard. Or accept that sometimes good people have to do bad things to stop worse people from doing worse things. There has to be another way. Then you better think of it fast, because tomorrow night, one way or another, this ends. He left her alone in the barn with her thoughts and her rifle and the terrible calculation of moral mathematics. That night Sarah gathered everyone in the house, Emma and Lucas, Thomas and his 2 ranch hands, Jacob Swift, 7 people against however many Stone would bring. Not good odds, but better than alone. Tomorrow night they're coming, Sarah said without preamble. Stone gave his word it would be a fair fight, no burning while we sleep. I don't trust that completely, but I believe he'll come at us straight on. How many? One of the ranch hands asked. At least 6, maybe more if Brand sends reinforcements. And we've got 7. Thomas did the math. Barely even odds. We've got better positioning and preparation, and we've got something they don't expect. Sarah looked at Jacob. Experience fighting together. Trust. Jacob snorted. Pretty speech. But trust doesn't stop bullets. No, this does. Sarah spread a map of the homestead on the table. We turn the house into a fortress. Create overlapping fields of fire. Force them to approach through kill zones. Make them pay for every foot they advance. She detailed the defensive plan. Firing positions in the house, the barn, the root cellar. Escape routes if they had to fall back. Rally points if they got separated. Emma listened with fierce attention, memorizing every detail. Lucas tried to look brave but couldn't hide his fear. When Sarah finished, Thomas asked the question everyone was thinking. And if we lose, then Emma and Lucas run. Jacob gets them to safety. The rest of us hold as long as we can. I'm not running, Emma said. You will if I tell you to. Sarah's voice carried absolute authority. Your job is to survive, Emma, to remember, to make sure our story gets told, win or lose. Before Emma could argue, Lucas spoke up in his small, serious voice. Mama, are we going to die? The room went silent. Every adult face turned toward Sarah, waiting for her answer. She knelt beside her son and took his hands. I don't know, sweetheart. I hope not. I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you safe. But sometimes bad things happen even when good people fight their hardest. Will you kill people like you did in the war? Sarah felt the words like a physical blow. If I have to protect you. Does it hurt to kill someone? Yes, every time. It hurts more than getting shot yourself. She pulled him close. But some hurts are worth carrying if it means keeping the people you love alive. Lucas hugged her tight. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. More than anything in this world. After the others left to take up watch positions, Sarah sat with her children in the quiet house. Tomorrow would bring violence and chaos. Tonight she wanted to give them peace. Tell us a story, Emma asked, like you used to when we were little. So Sarah told them stories, old legends of heroes and trials, tales of courage and sacrifice, stories about standing your ground when the world tells you to run. The same stories her father had told her. The same stories his father had told him. Stories that might be all that survived tomorrow night if things went badly. As her children's breathing slowed into sleep, Sarah kept talking, weaving the narrative of their family, their history, their place in the long line of people who'd fought for what was right. Outside, Jacob Swift kept watch from the barn roof. Thomas Bridger walked the perimeter. Somewhere in the darkness, Caleb Stone's men were preparing their attack. But in this house, in this moment, there was just a mother and her children and the stories that connected them to everyone who'd come before. Tomorrow Sarah would become a killer again, would take lives to save lives, would wade back into the darkness she'd tried so hard to escape. But tonight, she was just Mama, telling stories, holding her babies close, savoring what might be their last night together. The storm would break at dawn. But for now there was just this love and stories and the sound of children breathing in the dark. It would have to be enough. Dawn broke cold and clear. Sarah stood on her porch watching the sun paint the canyon walls in shades of blood and gold. Behind her the house was quiet. Emma and Lucas still sleeping. Jacob Swift on the barn roof keeping watch. Thomas Bridger in the root cellar checking ammunition. Everyone waiting for nightfall. Everyone waiting for Caleb Stone. But Sarah Crane had spent too many years waiting for violence to come to her. Today she'd take violence to them. She walked to the barn where Jacob was climbing down from his perch. "I need you to do something for me." "Name it." "Take Emma and Lucas to Ada's. Keep them there until this is over." Jacob studied her face. "You're not planning to wait for tonight, are you?" "No. I'm going to end this on my terms, not theirs." "Alone." "Alone." Sarah's voice carried absolute certainty. "Stone's men will be resting during the day, preparing for tonight's attack. They won't expect someone to hit them in daylight. I'll have surprise superior position and training they don't know I have." "That's not tactics, girl. That's suicide. It's the only way to keep my children out of the line of fire. Stone wants a war, fine, but it happens away from my house, away from Emma and Lucas." Jacob was silent for a long moment. "Your daddy would be proud. Stupid proud, but proud. Will you keep my children safe?" "With my life." Sarah hugged him quick and fierce. "Thank you, Jacob, for everything you taught me, for everything you've done." "Sarah." "Tell Emma I love her. Tell Lucas I'm sorry. Tell them both that some fights can't be won by running." She was walking away before Jacob could argue further. Thomas met her at the house. "What's the plan?" "You're staying here, protecting the homestead. I'm going hunting." "The hell I am. You need backup." "I need someone I trust to stay alive and tell the truth if I don't come back." Sarah gripped his shoulder. "Please, Thomas. Emma and Lucas will need someone. Jacob's old. You're strong. You can protect them if I fail." Thomas wanted to argue. She could see it in his face, but he understood the logic and the necessity. "Don't fail," he said gruffly. "Not planning to." Sarah saddled her horse and loaded her rifle with practiced efficiency. She'd spent the last hour preparing, checking every cartridge, testing the action, sighting the scope. Her hands shook as she worked, but they always shook now. She'd learned to shoot through it. As she rode north toward the canyon, Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her nightclothes, hair loose around her shoulders, eyes wide with understanding. "Mama," Sarah reined in. "Go back inside, Emma. You're leaving us. I'm protecting you. There's a difference." Emma ran down the steps. "Let me come with you. I can help. I can—" "No." Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "Your job is to survive, Emma. To live whatever happens today. To remember that your father was a good man and your mother tried her best. Can you do that for me?" Tears streamed down Emma's face. "Please don't go." Sarah dismounted and pulled her daughter close. "I love you more than life itself, you and Lucas. That's why I have to do this. That's why I have to go alone. Because the thing I'm about to do, the woman I'm about to become again, I don't want you to see it. I don't want you to carry it. I don't care what you do. I just want you to come back. I'll try, baby. I swear I'll try." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, mounted her horse, and rode away without looking back. If she looked back, she'd lose her nerve. Behind her, Emma stood in the yard crying. Jacob emerged to put an arm around her shoulders. Thomas watched from the porch, his blacksmith's hands clenched tight. Sarah rode toward the canyon where her husband had died. Rode toward the men who'd killed him. Rode toward a reckoning 5 years in the making. This time she wasn't running. This time she was the hunter. The canyon was exactly where she remembered. Sarah left her horse a quarter mile out and approached on foot, moving with the silence Jacob had taught her decades ago. She could hear them before she saw them. Voices echoing off canyon walls, the smell of coffee and bacon, men at ease, confident in their safety. Sarah found a position on the canyon rim, high ground with clear sightlines, escape routes in 3 directions, and cover from return fire. She settled into place and waited. Patience. Jacob had drilled it into her. Patience wins more battles than aggression. Below, Caleb Stone's camp came to life. 6 men, 7, 8. More than she'd expected. Stone was taking this seriously. She recognized Stone immediately, his arm still in a sling from yesterday's shot. He moved among his men, checking weapons, giving orders. Professional, organized, preparing to murder her children. Sarah's hands steadied on the rifle. The shaking stopped. It always stopped once the shooting started. She picked her first target. Not Stone. Not yet. The man loading kerosene barrels onto a wagon. The ones meant to burn her house. Deep breath. Exhale halfway. Squeeze. The rifle cracked. The man fell. Chaos erupted below. Men scrambled for cover, shouting, trying to locate the shooter. Sarah had already shifted position, moving 20 feet along the rim. Second shot. A man raising his rifle toward where she'd been. He dropped. Third shot. The horses. Not to kill them, but to scatter them. Cut off the men's mobility. Stone's voice cut through the panic. Up on the rim, northwest quadrant, return fire. Bullets whined off rocks near Sarah's position. But she'd already moved again. Always moving. Never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. 4th shot, 5th, 6th. Not all hits, some misses, but enough to keep them pinned, disorganized, unable to mount an effective defense. She wasn't trying to kill them all, just disable their operation, destroy the kerosene, scatter the horses, send a message. Touch my family, and I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Then a bullet struck close, too close, and Sarah recognized the shooter. Caleb Stone, one arm in a sling rifle, braced against a rock, his eye to the scope. Professional finding. Professional. She couldn't stay here. He'd marked her position. Sarah moved fast, scrambling along the rim as bullets followed her. Stone was good. As good as she was, maybe better with 2 working arms. She reached her horse, mounted, and rode hard for home. Behind her she could hear Stone's men regrouping, counting their dead and wounded, realizing what had just happened. The widow had come to them, and she'd bloodied them bad. Sarah rode into her yard to find Jacob, Thomas, and Emma armed and ready. They'd heard the distant gunfire, known what it meant. "How many?" Jacob asked. "I dropped 3, maybe 4, wounded 2 more, destroyed their kerosene supplies." Sarah dismounted, her hands shaking violently now that the action was over. "They won't attack tonight. They'll need time to regroup." "They'll come anyway," Thomas said. "Angry, vengeful." "Let them." Sarah's voice was ice. "I'll be ready." But Emma was staring at her mother with wide eyes, seeing something she'd never seen before. Blood on Sarah's sleeve, not her own, just spatter from a close shot. Gunsmoke smell clinging to her clothes, the flat, dead expression in her eyes that combat brought. "Mama." Her voice was small. "What did you do?" Sarah looked at her daughter and saw the exact moment Emma understood fully what her mother had been, what she still was when necessity demanded. "I did what I had to do," Sarah said quietly. "I became what I swore I'd never be again." Before Emma could respond, hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Sarah spun, rifle coming up. But it wasn't Stone's men. It was Sheriff Garrett, riding hard, his face pale. Behind him came Ada Murphy in her wagon, and behind her a dozen townspeople on horses. Garrett dismounted in a rush. "Sarah, thank God. We need to talk. Now." "What happened?" "Colonel Brand is dead." The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Had Stone killed him? A power struggle. How? Shot this morning. Clean kill from 300 yards. Garrett's eyes met hers. Same shooting pattern as Caleb Stone's shoulder wound yesterday. Same rifle. The implication hung in the air, clear and damning. "I was in the canyon," Sarah said carefully, "fighting Stone's men. Ask Thomas. Ask Jacob. I wasn't anywhere near town." "I know." Garrett held up a hand. "That's why I'm here. Because I believe you. But Sarah..." He looked genuinely pained. "Someone wants folks to think you did it. They left evidence. Your husband's old badge at the scene, a rifle shell matched to your Sharps model. I've been set up. Framed more like. Ada climbed down from her wagon. Someone killed Brand and made it look like you did it. Question is who and why? The answer came riding in behind them. Caleb Stone, blood-stained and furious with his remaining men flanking him, but his hands were raised and his rifle was holstered. Wasn't her, Stone announced to the gathered crowd. Couldn't have been. She was busy trying to kill me 2 hours ago. He gestured at his dead and wounded. Got my men to prove it. Everyone stared. Stone dismounted painfully, his wounded shoulder clearly giving him trouble. I don't like being used any more than the widow does. Someone killed Brand and tried to pin it on her. Someone who wanted both of us out of the way. Who? Garrett demanded. Only one man had the access, the opportunity, and the motivation. Stone looked at the sheriff. Your deputy, Miller. It took 3 hours to piece together the full story. Deputy Miller had fled town that morning, headed for the territorial line with stolen money from Brand's strongbox. Sheriff Garrett sent riders after him, but Miller had a good head start. Meanwhile, the town gathered at the church to hear Caleb Stone's confession. Brand hired me to run cattle and muscle holdouts, Stone admitted, standing before the assembled crowd. But I'm a soldier, not a murderer. I don't kill women and children. Miller knew that. Knew I was getting cold feet about the whole operation. He gestured at Sarah with his good arm. Then the widow here puts a bullet in me, and I realize she's the real deal. Trained. Professional. Deadly when she needs to be. She could have killed me yesterday. Chose mercy instead. Sarah sat in the front pew with Emma and Lucas on either side, listening, waiting. Miller saw an opening, Stone continued. Kill Brand, frame the widow. Let me and my men take the fall when the law came asking questions. He walks away with Brand's money and nobody to contradict his story. Why confess now? Thomas Bridger asked from the back. Because I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a patsy. Stone's scarred face hardened. And because the widow earned something yesterday. My respect. She fought alone against 8 men and made us look like amateurs. That takes courage I haven't seen since the war. He turned to Sarah directly. I'm done, pulling out, taking my men and leaving this valley. You won, widow. Not with mercy, not with law, with pure stubborn will. The room erupted in questions and arguments, but Jacob Swift stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. Shut up, all of you. The old scout's command silenced everyone. You want to know who Sarah Crane really is, I'll tell you. Sarah's heart sank. No, not now, not like this. But Jacob continued relentlessly. During the Apache campaigns there was a scout. Best tracker in 3 territories. Could shoot straighter than anyone I ever trained. Saved more lives than I can count. That scout was a woman. And she's sitting right here. Stunned silence. Sarah Crane wasn't just Daniel's wife, Jacob said. She rode with him, fought beside him. When he died, she laid down her guns because she had children to raise, tried to become someone else. But you can't bury who you are. He looked around the room at the faces of people who'd known Sarah for 5 years, who'd thought her weak, helpless, just another frontier widow needing protection. This woman could have killed every man who threatened her, could have wiped out Stone's gang and Brand's operation without breaking a sweat. She chose not to because she believed in law, in community, in solving problems without blood. Jacob's voice went soft. But you, all of you, you forced her hand, made her become what she tried to leave behind. You should be ashamed, and you should be grateful she chose mercy over justice. Ada Murphy stood. I knew, always suspected, the way she moved, the way she watched, the scars on her hands. She looked at Sarah with fierce pride. And I'm honored to know her, honored to stand with her. Thomas stood. Same. One by one others rose. Not everyone. Some folks looked uncomfortable, even frightened, but enough stood to show support. Emma squeezed her mother's hand. Lucas leaned against her side, and Sarah felt something crack in her chest. Grief and relief mixing together. The secret was out. The hiding was over. She was Sarah Crane, scout, mother, survivor, killer when necessary. All of it. Forever. Sheriff Garrett found Miller 3 days later trying to cross into the next territory. He came back in chains along with enough evidence to connect him to 3 murders, including Brand's. The trial was swift. Miller confessed everything, killing Brand to steal his money, framing Sarah to eliminate the valley's most dangerous defender, planning to let Stone take the blame. He hanged on a Tuesday morning. Sarah didn't attend. Instead, she stood at 3 fresh graves on the edge of her property. 3 of Stone's men had died in the canyon. Not by her hand. She'd aimed to wound, not kill, but from wounds that had bled out before help arrived. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the dead. "You picked the wrong side, followed the wrong man, made the wrong choices, but you were still someone's sons, someone's brothers, and I'm sorry." Emma stood beside her. "You didn't kill them, Mama." "Didn't I? I pulled the trigger. The fact that I aimed for the shoulder instead of the heart doesn't absolve me." "You were protecting us." "I was, and I'd do it again. That's what scares me." Sarah turned to her daughter. "The ease of it. How quickly I fell back into being that person. How little it took to make me forget everything I'd tried to become." "You're still Mama. Still the woman who bakes pies and tells stories. You're just also the woman who can protect what she loves." Sarah pulled Emma close. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best." They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Behind them, the homestead stood whole, undamaged, safe. The price had been paid in different currency than Sarah expected, not in her children's blood, not in her home, but in the last shreds of the peaceful life she'd tried to build. Red Mesa Valley knew now, knew what she was, what she'd been, what she could do. Some folks looked at her with new respect, others with fear, a few with both. Sarah Crane was no longer just the quiet widow of Copper Creek. She was the legend who'd stood against an empire and won. The woman who'd bloodied professional killers and walked away. The mother who'd go to war for her children without hesitation or mercy. 3 weeks after the shooting stopped, Sarah took Emma to the ridge above their property. "This is where your father proposed," she said, gesturing at the vista spread before them. "Right here. Said he wanted to build a house where we could watch the sunrise and set, where we could raise children and grow old together." Emma studied the view. "Why didn't you?" "Because Daniel was a lawman. Lawmen have enemies. He wanted to keep us safe, so he built the house down there. Out of sight. Protected. But not safe enough." "No." Sarah's voice carried old grief. "Not safe enough." She pulled her Sharps rifle from its case and handed it to Emma. "Your turn." Emma took the weapon with trembling hands. "Mama, I don't want—" "I know you don't. Neither did I. Neither did your father. But want doesn't matter out here." Sarah positioned her daughter, adjusting her stance. "The world doesn't care what we want. It only respects what we're willing to defend." She spent the next hour teaching Emma the basics. Breathing, stance, trigger discipline. Not to kill Sarah prayed Emma would never need that, but to understand. To know the weight of what her mother carried. When Emma finally fired her first shot, the recoil surprised her. The bullet went wide, missing the target completely. "Try again," Sarah said gently. "And remember, the rifle doesn't make you dangerous. The choice to use it does. That choice should never be easy." Emma fired again. Closer this time. By the 10th shot she was hitting the target. Not center mass, not precise, but competent enough to protect herself if necessary. Sarah watched her daughter work and felt pride mixed with sorrow. This wasn't the life she'd wanted for Emma, wasn't the legacy she'd hoped to pass down, but it was the legacy Daniel had died protecting, the knowledge that Crane women could stand their ground, could defend what was theirs, could survive whatever the frontier threw at them. "That's enough for today," Sarah said finally. They packed up and rode back to the homestead. Lucas was playing with Scout in the yard, his laughter carrying across the valley. Normal, innocent, untouched by what had happened. Sarah wanted to keep it that way, at least for him, at least for a while longer. That evening, Ada Murphy visited with news from town. "The territorial governor sent an investigator," she reported. "Looked into Brand's operation, found enough corruption to fill a library. Turns out Brand had judges, lawmen, even some territorial officials in his pocket." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Federal oversight. New officials appointed." Sheriff Garrett's been cleared of wrongdoing. He honestly didn't know how deep the corruption went. Ada smiled. And the valley's been declared protected land. No more forced sales. No more outside interests buying up homesteads. That's good news. There's more. Ada's expression turned serious. They want to name you deputy. Official law enforcement position. Said you've proven yourself capable. Sarah laughed, no humor in it. I just want to raise my children in peace. I know, but folks feel safer knowing you're here, knowing you'll stand if something threatens the valley again. I'm not a lawman. No. You're something better. You're someone who understands that law is just words, unless someone's willing to enforce it. Ada squeezed Sarah's hand. Think about it. No pressure. The offer stands whenever you're ready. After Ada left, Sarah sat on her porch and watched the stars come out. The same stars she'd watched during the war. The same stars that had seen Daniel die and her children born and everything in between. The frontier was changing. Law and civilization creeping westward. Someday there'd be no more wild places. No more land for people like her who didn't quite fit in civilized society. But that day wasn't today. Today, there was still space for women who could track and shoot and survive. Women who chose mercy when possible and violence when necessary. Women like Sarah Crane. Emma joined her on the porch. Are you going to take the deputy position? I don't know. What do you think I should do? I think you should do what feels right. What Papa would have wanted. Sarah considered that. What would Daniel have wanted? He'd died trying to bring law to lawless country. Died believing that order was worth fighting for. Your father believed in justice, Sarah said slowly. Not vengeance, not violence for violence's sake, but standing up when standing up mattered. Like you did. Like we all did. Sarah pulled Emma close. You were brave, sweetheart. Following Deputy Miller, gathering information, standing firm when others ran. Your father would be proud. They sat in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, watching the valley settle into night. Somewhere out there, Caleb Stone was riding toward a new territory, his gang disbanded, his reputation ruined. Deputy Miller was dead, hanged for his crimes. Colonel Brand's empire had crumbled to dust. And Sarah Crane remained, still standing, still protecting, still carrying the weight of choices made and lives taken. The legend of the widow who'd faced down an empire would spread. Already she'd heard whispers, tales growing taller with each retelling. The woman who couldn't be intimidated, the mother who'd gone to war for her children, the ghost on the canyon rim who'd bloodied professional killers and walked away untouched. Some of it was true, some exaggeration, all of it a burden Sarah would carry for the rest of her life. But as she sat with her daughter under stars older than memory, she felt something like peace. She'd protected her children, kept her promise to Daniel, stood her ground when evil came calling. Some scars don't heal. Some nights still brought dreams of blood and gunfire. Some mornings her hands still shook when she touched the rifle. But she'd survived. Her children were safe. The valley was free. That had to be enough. Emma leaned against her shoulder. Tell me a story, Mama. Like when I was little. Sarah smiled in the darkness and began to speak. Not tales of heroes and trials this time, but the truth. Her truth. The story of a woman who'd tried to leave war behind, who'd built a quiet life on the frontier, who'd been forced to remember who she was to protect what she loved. A story without easy answers or clean endings. A story of sacrifice and survival and the terrible choices mothers make to keep their children safe. A story that would be passed down through generations of Crane women. A reminder that strength comes in many forms. That mercy and violence can coexist in the same heart. That the frontier respects those strong enough to stand their ground. As the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, Sarah Crane told her daughter the truth about blood and courage and the price of peace. And Emma listened, memorizing every word, understanding that someday she might need to make similar choices. Understanding that being a Crane woman meant carrying both compassion and steel. The legacy wasn't simple, but it was honest. And on the frontier, honesty mattered more than comfort. The moon rose over Copper Creek, painting the valley in silver light. The homestead stood quiet. The graves rested undisturbed. The future waited uncertain but free. Sarah Crane had stood her ground, had fought her war, had protected what mattered. The rest, the legend, the fear, the respect, the burden would come in its own time. Tonight, there was just a mother and daughter, stars overhead, and the wind carrying the smell of sage and distant rain. Some stories end in triumph, some in tragedy. This one ended in survival. For the frontier, that was victory enough.